For those that have just joined, we will be starting shortly, but if you could find the chat and just tell us where you're from, we'll be with you very soon. Just going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started, but please let us know where you're from in the chat and we'll be with you soon. We'll be starting shortly, so if you can't hear any audio at the moment, that's just because we're waiting for a few more people to join in. We will be starting shortly. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of the Data Fam Community Jam. My name is Lorna Brown, formerly Lorna Eden. I'm a Tableau Zen Master, Public Ambassador, Workout Wednesday leader, Northwest Tableau User Group leader, and that's about it. We have a fantastic lineup for you today, but first, I'd really like to thank the Tableau Fringe Festival who have supported this Data Fam Community Jam with support from Tableau as well. So I'd like to shout out to Emily Kund, Kevin Fleurlage, Sarah Bartlett and Alex Walczek for all their hard work in making this event successful. I'd also like to thank Jordan Scott from Tableau for all of her hard work. We have 4 speakers for you today, roughly speaking for 20 minutes each. We will take 1 question per speaker live, and they will answer any other questions themselves. Please make sure you ask the questions in the Q&A box so they do get answered, and the chat is just for chat and comments only. If you do post a question in the chat, it might get missed and not answered. The event is being recorded, and we will share the recording on the YouTube channel, and it will be shared with you via the email you provided for us. First off, I really want to give a big shout out and thank you to Matt God Kent Martin. He's unfortunately leaving Tableau on the 15th of May. He's been a big part of the Tableau community, and he took the time to get to know a lot of us and understanding the community. So here's to you, Kent. Okay, first up, go on, Ellie.
I was just going to say, Kent, in addition to his amazing maps and product skills, is a little known to be excellent at karaoke.
Good to know. Okay, so first up, speaking-wise, we have Ellie Fields, who you've just heard from. Ellie is the Senior Vice President of Product Development at Tableau at Scale. Her team delivers Tableau cores, server experience, and mobile products, and are responsible for driving engagement and adoption of analytics. She also leads up product and engineering teams for Tableau Public, the world's largest community of data and data lovers. Ellie joined Tableau in the early years of the company in 2008 and was part of the team that launched Tableau Public and Tableau Online. She has helped grow the entire product suite and Tableau's robust customer community. Before Tableau, she worked in product management at Microsoft and in late stage venture capital. She has an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business and a BS in engineering from Rice University, and she is a lifelong data geek. So, Ellie, over to you.
Great, thanks, Lorna. Let me go ahead and share and see if I can tell me when this looks reasonable to you. Let's see here. Go ahead and present, and sorry, just a second. My desktop's doing fun and interesting things here. How does that look?
That was perfect. Thanks, Ellie.
Okay, great. So what I'm here to talk to you about a bit is what we're trying to do at Tableau to help folks engage with data a little bit more. It's something I think about a lot. As Lorna mentioned, I spent a lot of my time with Tableau Public, which recently has had an amazing traffic surge and an opportunity to help a lot of governments around the world share their COVID-19 data with their local constituencies. But mostly what I'm going to talk about today is sharing data and engaging people with data inside organizations. And tell you a little bit about the roadmap. I have my email here and my Twitter, and would love to hear any feedback, either here on the webinar or after. The lawyers make me say this. Basically, I might show you some things that aren't shipped yet. We can't make any guarantees. We're a software company. We can't represent anything forward-looking without saying this. So, so now you've heard from the lawyers, we can get into the better things. If you'll indulge me just for a minute, I'll tell a little bit of a different take on my background than what Lorna introduced me to. When I was in college, I fell in love, and many of you may have fallen in love in college too. It's a thing people commonly do, but I fell in love and fell in love very, very deeply. And I fell in love with MATLAB. I was an engineering student. I would spend most of my nights and most of my days with MATLAB. I thought about MATLAB all the time. I dreamed in MATLAB. That was the kind of college life I had, and I really loved it. I loved how I could work with data in a flexible way. MATLAB was very coding intensive at the time. I think they've updated some things, but I could code and make beautiful graphs and so on. I thought it was a really cool way to work with data, and it was really fun. So that was kind of my first love story there. But then I graduated and I went to the real world, and I actually ended up working at a large investment bank in New York for a while, because they really like quantitative people there. And there I used tools that were less sophisticated, let's say. And Excel is a great tool. It does a lot of great things, but it doesn't do some things as well as others. I tried to convince people to use more advanced ways of looking at data at this place, but I learned something really interesting, which was when you're sharing data with people, you want to be able to understand what's in there. And so the partners at this bank had always worked in Excel, and even though there were better ways to do it, they wanted to make sure they could understand what was in the data. They didn't want somebody coding something up and giving them an answer. And it was a really key learning for me. But then I went after business school. I went to a large tech company and worked with some software. Never this particular screen, but screens a lot like this, where even though I was a data geek and even though I loved working with data, most of the time when I had a question about my data, I just quit because it was so hard. And I'm sure many of you have had this journey. I mean, my heart was broken. You know, my my love for data was severely tried at this time, and I felt like I just couldn't get anywhere. And that was about the time that I discovered Tableau. Christian Chabot had reached out to me, the founder and CEO, one of the founders and CEO, and we started talking, and I checked out the software, and it felt like what working with data always should have been. This visual approach, and I'm sure many of you know that, or you wouldn't be on this call. But it was a really emotional reaction for me of being able to not only work with data in a fluid way, but being able to present that to others without programming, and to be able to communicate with data as well. And I learned that when the tool fades into the background, you can really think with data, and that's really been my mission as part of Tableau, is to help people think with data, because I do think it's a different form of thinking. You know, you can think by writing an essay or an outline. I think it's a really good way of thinking. I use it a lot. We humans, especially with technical backgrounds, like to write systems diagrams, and those are also super helpful in their way. I've even met someone at the Tapestry conference, for any of you who are there, Nick Dianopoulos, who would think in comic book form, or write or explain in comic book form, which I think is really cool. It's just another way of thinking. And I think you can think with data. And I think a lot of the work that we see in Tableau Public and in the community and inside organizations that of course gets shared a little bit less, is really a form of thinking with data. And that's what's interesting to me, is not necessarily the end product of the dashboard, although that's the artifact that kind of encapsulates the expertise, or the point of view of the author. This is a visualization by Chris Love, who many of you know, about just how roads are named in the UK. And I find it a really interesting and fun way to explore a question about roads and naming. And it's something I never would have done, but I learned about roads just by looking at this viz and learning through Chris. So this has kind of been what I've been trying to bring through at Tableau for a number of years now. In this diagram, many of you may know Jock McInley, who's been at Tableau for a long time, kind of coined this cycle of visual analysis. And it describes the thinking process of working with data, of kind of starting with a task and getting some data, finding structure in it, data view, developing insight, maybe getting some more data, sharing it with someone, getting an opinion, and going around and around and around again. And this was really one of the core ideas that drove the development of Tableau. And what we see is that when an organization can do this, when you can do this throughout a whole organization, you actually get this concept of a data culture. And I know that, just having seen some of the folks on the call, I know many of you are in places where I've visited as customers, and I've seen that you all have this kind of a data culture. But sometimes people ask me, what does it mean to have a data culture? Like, what does that actually look like day to day? And I use a couple of analogies. One is this idea of answering a question, which is a common experience many of us have had, which is, it used to feel like answering a question was like going to the airport back when we used to do that. And, going through the lines and going through the scanners and waiting at the gate and, doing this thing and doing that thing and the other thing. It's just so many steps and waiting on other people. And now when you get to a place where you have the data available and tools that you can work with fluidly, it feels a lot more like taking a charter jet. And I have to imagine here, because I don't really take charter jets so often, but you walk up to the plane, you get on, and it goes exactly where you want to go. And that's a different feeling. The other analogy I use is how it feels to collaborate with people. So, having a meeting or giving a presentation in a traditional format is this one-to-many kind of mode where somebody stands up and tells everybody else the answer. And as an audience member, your participation is really limited to believing that answer or not believing that answer. Maybe you get to ask a question at the end, but you're a taker of somebody's presentation. And I think what I love to see in data cultures is that having a meeting really feels much more like a jam session. One person may call the meeting and bring a point of view. Others may bring a different point of view. You may explore yet a third point of view right there in the meeting. And it's a really different way of working with people, and I find it much more rewarding. Things also tend to go a lot faster when you do it this way. And so when you start thinking about the product that we build at Tableau, our job, of course, is to facilitate this kind of interaction happening, right? The being able to take the charter jet instead of go through all the lines at the airport, and turning your meetings from kind of a stale presentation into this jam session. And so my team thinks a lot about how to do this in product. Obviously, there are a lot of ways to do this. I think there's internal communities, there's blogs and things you can learn, but I think that product plays a real role here as well. And so it's really what we spend our time thinking about. And in our engagement roadmap, we're thinking about a lot of different ways to do this. And I'm going to go into some of the ideas that we've either recently shipped or are working on. And there are a number more that we have in the roadmap that are not really at a state that we can share it, or a confidentiality that we can share it. But here are some of them. And really what I'm trying to communicate here is not necessarily the features, each feature itself, but the way that we're thinking about engaging in organizations. And I would love to hear from those of you who are working on this problem in your organization to try and reach others with data, build a data culture, and hear if you think these things would be useful for you. So let's start with reaching end users where they are. The first thing I'll talk about here is mobile. We've made a big investment in our mobile apps. We continue to invest in our mobile apps. And just in 20.2, we actually changed the opening screen on the apps to be home, just like the browser, to have recommendations there. We're doing a ton of work behind the scenes on different auth types and MDM. So for the enterprises who have various requirements around security or MDM support, we're constantly adding that. A few releases ago, we added biometric security. We've got some offline interactivity. We're doing some clever things you may have noticed about taking dashboards that were published for a big screen on a desktop and actually auto-laying them out on mobile. And then we're thinking about things like enterprise customization, so colors and icons and so on. So some of what I've talked about is in process, some of it is shipped, but the big picture here is I would really encourage you to think about the mobile apps in your organization if you're trying to engage people, because a lot of times folks just really need an answer very quickly. And they want to get an answer where they are. And to me, data is the most valuable when you're using it right in the moment of making a decision or working with people or trying to understand something. Another thing that we've been shipping over the last number of quarters and have another one coming out in 20.3 is the idea of just getting out to more traditional formats. And really this is based on feedback we've heard from customers for many years, which is, hey, interactive in the browser and on mobile is great, but frankly, I have a lot of people in my organization who need more traditional stuff. And so last year, we allowed you to start sending PDFs from subscriptions. We've let you print to PowerPoint. We're making small improvements on these. I think we're doing some landscape and portrait improvements on the PDFs. And in 20.3, or around then, you'll see us come out with export crosstab to Excel on web. And this has just been a little bit of a pain point for some users as they use especially the web product. They don't feel like the export crosstab is exactly what they want. We've heard that from a number of people, so we've been investing in updating that as well. One thing that we're working on, and this is a little bit more forward-looking, so I'm definitely inviting feedback here, is the idea of just richer notifications inside of Tableau. And when we think about notifications, we're really just thinking about getting you any information from any part of Tableau. So you may have noticed that you don't actually get subscriptions anywhere inside the site right now. So we might bring those to you. Comments, if you're using those, extract changes, all kinds of information that might be useful to you in Tableau. We do have notifications in Tableau now, but we're looking at really making an investment here to make them more useful and bring you more kinds of notifications. And so I'm interested in what kinds of notifications you would want from your data. Alerts would show up here as well. I mentioned subscriptions. Those are two types that go only to email today, and it's hard to find when you've had an alert inside the in the interface. The other part of notifications is that not everyone is in the Tableau app, of course, and so we are thinking about pushing these out to collaboration tools like Slack and Teams. We push out to email now, but giving you more flexible ways to receive these notifications so you get what you need when you need it. Now, I've got a few more things to go through. I know we've got several presenters, so I'll take probably just 2 or 3 more minutes and go through some of these quickly. If any of these pique your interest, please do reach out. I mentioned sending data into the flow of work, or sending analytics into the flow of work. This is a picture of our developer platform team and friends, and I just put it here because they're a bunch of really, good-looking and excited people. But you'll see us make more and more, and you have seen this over the last few years, of an investment in the platform. So making it easier to do things with embedding, exposing more APIs. We recently released webhooks, which is basically a way to wire up events coming out of a Tableau viz. And so some good momentum here, and this is an explicit direction for us, which any of you who have developed with Tableau tools will probably be very happy to hear. Moving on to the next kind of theme of investment, shortening time to answers. We just shipped metrics, which I'm really excited about. This was out in the 20.2 release that just came out last week. We've already seen in Tableau Online a lot of sites creating metrics. So if you've done that and you have any experience that you want to communicate back, please let me know. But basically the idea of metrics is just an easier way to use data you look at every day. It's not an exploration use case, it's a monitoring use case. So we have customers who say, hey, I want to look at my web traffic every day when I wake up in the morning. This is really integrated into Tableau. I sometimes talk of these as the headline for your data. So you kind of get the headline with a metric, but of course you can always go back to the view to ask deeper questions. And I think that's a really important handoff, because KPIs in the past have sometimes, for me, fallen down when they just give you the number and they tell you if it's up or down, but you don't really know why, and you don't have a chance to go further. So try out metrics if you're on 20.2 or in Tableau Online. We've also made a number of investments, and we'll continue to, and just making it easier for people to get data faster. So the home screen that we shipped last year, we continue to improve on. We are using that as a home base to add other things into it. We've also started sending site invitation emails. We're going to be adding recommendations into those to just make them more visual and draw people in. And then we're making a big investment in in-app help and training. We have some great documentation, some great help out there, but it can be hard to find and a little disjoint from when you're actually in the product. So we're trying to bring those together. One thing that we think is really important in a data culture, and one of the strengths of a Tableau deployment, is you get to leverage the knowledge of all these other people who have published visualizations or seen vizzes. So just to touch on a couple of ways that we see that kind of coming to life is, one, the recommendations feature. We shipped this last year. We continue to improve it. We continue to put it in more places. But basically, this is your kind of smart best friend in Tableau who nudges you and says, hey, everybody else is looking at this viz. It's really kind of popping right now. It's really important. Or, hey, everybody else who has your role or people like you are checking this out. You might want to go check it out as well. And so it's really just a way for you to discover things that are topical in your organization or relevant for you, and not forcing you to kind of go through the whole implementation. We've seen a great response from customers on this. And in my mind, it's really it's one of those ways to kind of pick up all that expertise that lives in the brains of people around you and learn from it. And then a little bit more pedestrian, but some really important improvements to sharing that you may have seen start to roll in, better sharing dialogues, the ability to find people. We'll just continue to iterate here to make it better so you can share to groups, find things that have been shared to you, because that's that's one of those things that can be hard. It goes into email, you never see it again. So we'll give you a place to go back to those. And then even down the road, granting permissions while you're sharing. So if you're trying to get a viz to someone, they don't have permissions, you don't have to go and figure out how to get them permissions. You can grant it there. If, of course, you have the ability and you have the role where you can grant permissions. And then finally, the heart of any Tableau deployment is, of course, content creation. So we continue to work on the complete web experience to help more and more people create content. And you can see some of the improvements out here on the left. One that we just shipped actually is opening in web. So if you're on 20.2, you'll be able to open files directly from web without having to publish them from desktop. So just a nice web experience there. And then coming up is something I'm really excited about as well, which is a personal sandbox, so that you can kind of keep things private until you're ready to make them public without necessarily needing to save to your hard drive. And then we've got starters coming that have come to the home screen as well in 20.2. We shipped the first of these last year. We're actually going to be adding more and more starters. And these are a good way to just get into a data source that you don't know very well, start with some best practice dashboards. We work with people who know the data source and the domain really well to build these dashboards, and we're going to continue to flow those in over the next year or so. And then governance is really the underpinning of a lot of this. I personally believe you can't have a data culture without great governance. You can't really open up the ability for people to analyze and create with data unless you have great governance. So we are constantly looking at ways to make licensing easier, to make it easier to administer permissions, to move content around and things like that. So in a whirlwind, those are just some of the themes we're thinking about as we think of improving engagement at the product side. And just to close, I'd like to say, it's great to be part of the Tableau dev team. This is a subset of the product development team. These are a bunch of product managers, in fact. The whole dev team is too big to get on steps now, but there's a tremendous amount of passion for what we do in this team. Kent Martin fans can find him near the front. Hopefully you all have seen or know one or two of these folks, but it's really great to be part of the development team, and we really do what we do to try and make your deployments better. And with that, I will turn it back over to Lorna and the next presenter.
Hey Ellie, great presentation. I loved hearing the roadmap from Tableau. We have a few questions in the Q&A. Some of them I think you're better off answering yourself, but the one that we're going to answer live is, my organization is in the infancy of Tableau implementation. As the person driving this effort, what are some tips on evolving our organization from a very non-tech savvy individuals into a data culture?
It's a great question. I would give you 3 places to look. One, even if the culture is on the whole not kind of data savvy, there's usually 1 or 2 or 3 people who have the interest. And if they have the interest, they can learn what they need to do. So developing those that even if it's a small starting cohort of people who do care and are going to be your first kind of authors and power users and folks to teach others, I think that's really important. Check out the blueprint, which is kind of a map for how to deploy Tableau and gain a data culture. There's a lot of great tips in there that we learned from other customers. So you get kind of a brain dump in the blueprint. And then finally, I would say it's great that you're on the Fringe Festival Community Jam. In the community, there is so much to learn from the community. One thing I often tell folks at smaller companies who don't have the infrastructure is just leverage what's out there. Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday. They're basically things that you could just get in a room with some people at your organization and do to train, and nobody has to set it up. Nobody has to prepare the data sets. That's all done for you. So I think really leveraging what you can in the community can make your company and your company's data community feel a lot larger.
Cool, thanks Ellie. If you could just take some of those questions that are in the Q&A, that would be great. Thank you very much again for your time. I'm just going to quickly share my screen again. So Next up, we have Christopher Scott. Christopher is a Tableau Centre of Excellence leader at Genworth Financial in Raleigh, I think it is. He is also the leader of the Raleigh-Durham Tableau User Group, RDU TUG, and is a Tableau User Group ambassador. Christopher has been architecting data visualization since 2008 and continues to visit up every chance he has. Are you ready, Christopher?
I am ready. You know, I thought we spoke the same language, Lorna, but you butchered every one of those.
My bad. Sorry for
I
being
will
British.
introduce and use, yes, that's right. Well, anyway, I thank you so much for having me. And are you ready for me?
Yep, ready when you are.
All right, fantastic. Let me share my screen, and can you see Data Fam Community Jam?
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again, Lorna, for having me. Thank you for the Data Fam Community Jam leadership, Kevin and Sarah, and all the folks throughout the world that have really poured into this project. Thank you, Tableau and Jordan and the rest of the community team that are involved in this and just giving it 120,000%. I'm so excited to be part of this community. I've been part of this community for I was a little bit off since 2012. I've been part of using Tableau and part of the data community. Been leading the Raleigh Durham Tableau user group for a while. I'll get into that in just a minute. But I'm just never surprised and always blown away at how much this community really gives to one another and pours into making this not only one of the best software in the world, but also the best community in the world, my true family and friends. So without further ado, let me jump right in and begin. So the title of this talk is Shepherd or Sherpa. Ellie, thank you so much. I really feel like you just loaded the bases, and I'm just going to bun it right in so we can kind of get a few runs in there. But this is literally all about data culture and about when to lead and when to carry. So I have to attribute the title of this to my old Tableau account manager. She has, with the Salesforce acquisition, gone on to bigger and better things than helping us out at Genworth. But her name is Brooke Lee, and she kind of gave me this kind of concept of everything that I was doing with a data culture and everything at Genworth and the things that I've done throughout my career to help my organization, both as a COE leader and as well as an analyst, just a everyday kind of casual analyst. So this talk is not only for those of you that are in big organizations and you're struggling to change your data culture or create a data culture. It's for small organizations. It's for the analyst who thinks that, I'm just going to be a Tableau developer and that's all I'm going to be. And it's for the folks that have been in their position for a while and are looking to grow their skills, to grow their organization. They're even part of, just their team. So really, this is going to hit home, I think, for a lot of people, because ultimately we're all after the same thing, and that is healthy data cultures and data fams within our organizations. So let me go back, start at the beginning. Who am I? Again, as Lorna said, I am Christopher Scott. You can find me at CG Scott DVA, Data Visualization Architect. I have to give that up to one of my co-leaders of the Raleigh Durham Tableau User Group, Ken Patton, who inspired me with that title. And I heard it, went back to my boss and said, I've got to have that. That's got to be my new title. And sure enough, he let me have it. So I'm grateful for, again, this community, just inspiring little things like job titles. I am the husband and father of 4 kids. And as you will see in this picture, it's not the best picture of our family. We have other ones, and my wife would prefer that I use another one. But this really tells the story that it's not always going to be a perfect picture. Not everyone's going to be smiling. Not everyone's going to be looking at the camera. But you put on a happy face. You take the picture because you're making memories. And so that's my little aside there. As Lorna mentioned, I am the leader and co-leader of the Raleigh Durham Tableau user group. I've been doing that for about 5 years now. We meet quarterly. If you are in the Raleigh-Durham area or anywhere in North Carolina and want to come join us, we meet quarterly. Our next event will be in June, so I can't give a shout out there. All of that information will be coming live to Splash very soon. So we're very excited. We'll be hosting virtually again. We're grateful for Tableau supporting our virtual efforts and allowing us to still meet even in the midst of all of this chaos. So as Lauren mentioned, I'm also a Tableau ambassador for user groups. So I help other user groups that are either coming up or user groups that need speakers, or any way I can help this community to grow and to thrive and to flourish. That's all about it's really ingrained in my DNA. So I'm also, as I mentioned, the COE leader. So I lead our internal Tableau user group at Genworth Financial. So I'm actually in our mortgage insurance division, but I also help out our company in many other ways using Tableau and data and analytics to be a data-driven data culture within our organization. So everything I talk about today is going to be personal experience. So kind of a mini bio, if you will, of everything that I have done, everything that I am about. The DNA that's within me is what I'm going to share today. So I have lived and breathed and experienced all of this. And while I can't say that I've perfected any of these things, I am constantly learning, constantly looking for sources of inspiration to continue to grow and to make Genworth, as well as our global Tableau community, an even better world. So a few notes really quickly, and really, again, just harking on everything that Ellie said. So if you're just tuning in, tune in right after, go to YouTube right after this presentation, right after we publish it, and go back and listen to Ellie's talk again. Even if you listen to it again. So happy to be part of a community here, using a piece of software and a company that is all about everything that I'm talking about. So none of this stuff occurs in a vacuum, and every bit of technology that Tableau puts into play is all bolstered and supporting all of these efforts. So a few notes really here. Data culture is the goal. So if we talk about everything we're gonna talk about here, it's all leading to one thing, and that is to create this data culture. And again, not to belabor the point, but it is different for every organization. But to the extent that, sorry, let me move this real quick. But it's knowing that you have data and wanting to get value out of it. It's been said that every company is a data company and every person is an analyst. But at the heart here, Tableau gives us a great definition it's on their Blueprint website. And they say that becoming truly data-driven requires changing mindsets, attitudes, and habits, embedding data into the identity of the organization. So your DNA, making sure that it's all about the data. People want to use the data and encourage others to do the same. You ask hard questions. It's being able to not only ask hard questions, but ask the right questions, challenge ideas, challenge the status quo and what people think based on their intuition with the data. And they come together with this shared mission to improve the organization and themselves with data. The leaders inspire through action, basing their decisions on data, not intuition. So I love the topic of conversation. I love to talk about in my organization about transitioning from the kind of gut reaction and gut intuition to a data-driven decision-making with all of the tools at our disposal, most importantly being Tableau. So I love this quote from Steve Jobs. I talk about this all the time. When we talk about Tableau and data, data-driven culture, we have very, very smart people within our organization. And so we want to, like Steve Jobs said, we want to hire great people and have them stay working for us. You have to let them make decisions, and you have to be run by ideas and not by hierarchy. The best ideas have to win. Otherwise, good people won't stay. And in the same breath, he goes and says, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. And I truly believe that all around our organization, we have absolutely brilliant people who are the best in what they do. And to think that they have to deliver their all of their data to some small team and they're the only people that can touch the data is not letting the smart people do what they do best, and that is to be able to analyze the data, to ask questions. And that goes along with Tableau's mission, Tableau's vision and mission. And people who know the data should ask the questions. So I remember seeing this at Tableau conference a few years ago, and they keep harking on it, that the closer you get to the data, the closer you get to the SMEs, the people, the knowledge experts, the ones that know the most about the business, should be the ones that are asking the questions. And ultimately, as we've kind of discovered within Tableau, should be the ones that are creating the visualizations. So I'm so thankful for Tableau's new tools like Ask Data and Explore Data, and using Tableau on the web authoring capabilities that are just very, very low bars of entry into getting people using the data, putting the data at their fingertips. And so again, Ellie mentioned it before, but one of the greatest things that Tableau has put out that really, I think those of us that have been, in this mindset for a long time, they really just codified it, that this Tableau blueprint is all about enabling our organization to be data-driven. Again, Tableau says it's a methodology for building the capabilities you need to create a successful data-driven organization. What I love about this, and I'll talk about this with into the thoughts here about the shepherd versus the Sherpa, is that there's not a position here in this architecture for a team or just a simple a team of analysts or an analyst. It is a very wide scope of the the roles and responsibilities. They go far outside of just a simple analyst, or I've just got to be a Tableau developer. If you talk about wanting to grow your career, to grow your organization, it takes new forms and new ideas. So again, there's tons of material out on the Tableau website, and there have been blogs written about it. Everything there's all about the what does it mean to be an organization, to utilize Blueprint. You can go out and look at that for yourself. So again, I talk when we talk about this shepherd versus Sherpa, which we'll get into in a few seconds. Our organization, our analysts, this just all reminded me, it goes back to, again, my mini bio here, that, it's like children. And I heard this analogy a few years ago, that we take this idea that we have these constantly evolving roles. And so when you're a parent, if any of you are parents, you can immediately relate to this. You go from this commander to where you're giving the rules and you're being very hard line, to the coach where you still have the rules and regulations and everything, but you're just kind of, again, relaxing a little bit, guiding them into the right place. And then you move to the counselor, and finally, when they're all grown up, and then your role evolves into kind of a consultant. So as we think through these next few steps, we're thinking of the evolution of what does a data-driven culture, and what is an analyst, how do you, as either you're an analyst or you're a manager, an executive, what do these roles look like? And I think at the end of the day, we have to have there's a beginning and there's a middle and an end. And so I'm going to talk about that as we talk about what does it mean to be a shepherd versus a Sherpa, and then how do we apply that in our organizations. So when we start as a Sherpa, you say what's a Sherpa? So for those of you that they don't know, they are ones who on a hiking expedition, on a mountain hiking trip, they're ones who set up camp, they manage the hikers, they run ahead, they make sure the tea is on the boil. I think for my British friends, that is paramount to, even before the beds get set up, that tea better be on the boil. So that's one of their primary roles and responsibilities. They are extraordinary human beings. They know the area. They're highly skilled. It's even been tested. They're evolved to thrive in these low oxygen environments, but they're not invincible. Now we can take that and we can apply that to our everyday analysts. So those of you that are analysts, or you have a team of highly skilled analysts that are maybe they're not evolved, and maybe they just have this huge amount of education and they're highly skilled in what they can do. But these individuals, they're not invincible. They're not invincible to, as we've seen here in the past few months, they're not immune to the job market. They're not immune to just getting worn out. And as we see here, so there are some quick pros. They can provide the quick wins. They develop these consistent and well-designed dashboards. Again, so I think about ones from, my good friend Ryan Sleeper here. These dashboards, they provide these very, very well-designed dashboards that are absolutely beautiful, and they're going to get the buy-in, they're going to get the thumbs up, and the stakeholders are going to be very, very happy with those deliverables, right? Well, some of the cons are mistrust. So in saying that all of my information has to be delivered from one team or one person, it's saying that, well, you may know the data best, but we don't trust you with our data. So it provides this mistrust in every capable person within your organization. It's also rate limiting, or the bottleneck, right? Everybody's seen this image, whether you're in in a foreign country, or this is the typical 5 o'clock rush hour. This is a very rate limiting. You're only able to produce the dashboards, the analytics that one person or one team is able to deliver. And then again, they are very strong and capable, produce very gorgeous dashboards, but they will tire out. And I say this as coming from this experience, that being in an organization like this, it's only a matter of time before this analyst, this highly skilled Sherpa / analyst, is just overwhelmed, and they're out looking on the job market for somewhere where they will not be the only person doing these analytics jobs. So might we, and then again, the growth here will be slight and it will be slow. So any amount of data culture will be there. The growth will be there. Seeing the data, for yourself, will be there, and the data will be available, but the growth in the organization of what is possible will be very slow. So we offer, on the other side of the coin, I offer a kind of a better way, right? And that's what we're all about. And might I, challenge us as we move in an organization, that we move into something it's a little different. It's an evolved role. It's certainly, both of these things I think are necessary, but might I suggest, a better way. So what does a shepherd do? We all kind of know what a shepherd does. They tend and they care for sheep. They protect from predators. They feed the sheep, and they give them some leash, and they let them go out on their own. As you see, not a single shepherd, not a single sheep in that picture has a leash on them. So as we talk about kind of that parenting model, we've got a certain amount of leash we give to our children as they grow, and we're allowing them to kind of go out and make their mistakes, or providing this trust in our organization for our people. So as we think about let me pull my chat up here. All right. So some of the cons that, I talked about the pros first with the other one. I'm going to talk about the cons first with this approach. So understand that there's going to be more opportunity for failure as you allow individuals, kind of that every person is an analyst, the self-service mentality of Tableau. You give more people the access to their data. You're going to necessarily have to understand that there's going to be some opportunity for failure here. Again, as we've seen, the first time out, sheep are pretty dumb. So when we give people these tools, don't expect them to be pros out of the gate. You're going to get naturally the worst dashboards and visualizations at first, and then the time to productionalizing this content is going to be slow. We have to understand that at first. But I think that's where it stops, and that's where we can transition. The pros are, we empower our users. I don't think I've ever heard from any manager, any senior leadership, any executive saying, no, we don't want smarter individuals. We don't want more capable, self-empowered users of data and within our organizations. We don't want people to learn new tools that are going to better themselves in our organization. So ultimately, we're empowering users with these tools by being the shepherd. We are making supermen and superwomen, right? You're asking business relevant questions. There's no need to translate that documentation to a person and ask the questions that already knows the questions. They know how to, what type of data they need, where they're going to get the data, how they're going to, create valuable content that is going to serve both them and their management. And then obviously here, like we talked about before, there's greater opportunity and ability for growth, both individually and as an organization, where we have, again, the parts, the the whole is the sum of the parts, right? As the more the people grow, the more the organization and the data culture grows. So where are you? The questions are for you today. Do you need a few quick wins? Is everything messy and discombobulated? Does it look like somebody created it with a crayon? Do you want to showcase the art of the possible? Maybe you might need to Sherpa. Maybe you are in that position where you are the expert in your organization, and you see a lot of need for good best practices, and you are the one that can provide that. You can be an instrument of change. You might need to be a Sherpa for a while and take things on your own back and lift them to where they can go. Or are you developing most or all of the dashboards? Do you have a lack of trust in your Tableau developers? Are you stuck in a traditional kind of waterfall methodology? Well, you may need to let go of things, take a step back, and learn to trust your people. You've hired the smart people, the ability is all around you, and you know that there's only a certain amount of growth that can grow within one part of the organization. So I challenge you again, this idea of a center of excellence. So maybe it's time that you either, if you don't have one in your organization, maybe the first step into getting into, as Ellie mentioned this before, into getting into this mentality is creating a center of excellence. And I love this model. Interworks created it. Just the 5 things that really a good COE or center of excellence does: establishing the best practices, the training, the support, developing new dashboards, and promoting and rewarding this culture of analysis, this data culture. We're all about creating and promoting and this data culture. So there's tons of content out there. I highly recommend going and listening to the content from both Simon and Emma from TC19 last year. Paul Banu gives a great presentation almost every single year at both Tableau Conference and Tableau Conference Europe. No doubt he will give another one virtually this year. Highly recommend going on YouTube, searching for those names, Tableau, Center of Excellence. They give more, again, top 50 reasons why your organization needs a Center of Excellence, more than I can say in a few minutes. So again, all of these start with a Sherpa or two. Ellie said this perfectly, that they're all about having the smart people, the skilled analysts that are going to be able to take it off the ground, show the art of the possible, and provide those quick wins to help the organization get started. They provide resources, enable, they encourage, and they incentivize. I think it's critical that these centers of excellence, they incentivize the people that are the smart people that we've hired, helping them to get whatever they need to create the best in data and analytics possible. And understanding, obviously, that it's going to be 1 step forward and 2 steps back, being comfortable with progress, ever how slow it is, understanding that the more these individuals grow, the more the organization will grow. And then finally, they just might surprise you. And without further ado, that is it. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this kind of mini bio. I'm open for questions. Lorna?
Hey, Christopher. There's one from Charles, which says, what's the next steps after the DVA title? With a winky face.
So that is what this entire presentation is all about. It's being the DVA, the architect, the Tableau developer and transitioning that role. I think within the blueprint does a fantastic job, and I'll go back here, because the blueprint provides you a whole wealth of opportunities to grow and shine. So for me, and actually a co-leader of mine in the Raleigh-Durham Tableau user group, Paul McHale, shout out to Paul, is leading the COE and Tableau effort at Red Hat right now, and focusing on community. So if you're strong and you love to talk and give presentations and you love the idea of community and engagement and support, maybe this community role is something that you transition from being just an analyst to the community leader within your organization. Or maybe you're you really like the best practices and to measure and to create, content for proficiency and training courses. Or maybe it's you really like the server stuff, so you're going to go get your server certifications and learn all you can about the server. And so maybe the agility. So I think the blueprint model gives the ability for at least in my opinion and perspective, I think that the blueprint model gives an idea and an opportunity for teams and analysts to grow outside of their current kind of box, and to help, again, drive all of these things, no matter where you end up, are going to help drive that data culture.
Cool, thank you. And one last quick question.
Yes.
Do you recommend training new users yourself, or directing them to Tableau workshops online?
That's is a great question. It could be both. I think both are extremely valuable. It depends on your kind of bandwidth. I do a 3-prong approach. We have a hands-on training where we train in-house. We also do a one-on-one. So I use things like Ellie said with with Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, Tableau Tip Tuesday, Lorna. I use all of those things in that one-on-one training, where I'm giving an hour a week, every other week, to those individuals. And obviously with multiple people, you can start to kind of replicate that process. And then the third prong is the self-guided learning. So it really just depends on how much the individual wants to dive in, how they learn best. So I think having like I said, a 3-prong approach really helps to for each type of individual within your organization, and their time commitments and commitments of how much they want to invest in learning Tableau.
Cool, thank you, Christopher. If you could release the screen.
Done.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so next up we have Joshua Smith. Joshua is an amateur poet, an amateur forester, an amateur farmer, and an amateur. He's a professional analytics manager in the manager in the healthcare space. He's also a Tableau Zen Master, Tableau Public Ambassador, and a water bender. Joshua, are you ready?
I'm now off mute. Yes, I am.
Perfect. So ready for your screen whenever you are.
All right. Can we all see this?
We can, yes.
Okay, and I'm going to offer the warning. You've probably heard my dog bark twice now, and there is a 18-month-old chasing the dog around. So you might get a little bit of background noise, and that's just the fun of presenting in a work-from-home environment in a family in a small house. But here we go. I'm going to jump right into this. There we go. Wanted to provide a little bit of background. I kind of disappeared from the online community. I've had a number of people reach out and say, how are things going? Are you okay? Disappearing during a pandemic is kind of a bad idea. And what happened is, just being on Twitter, which is the primary avenue for being online, you just got a lot of BS happening. And so I logged out of being on Twitter. Instead, here's some visibility into what I've been doing. I've built a house, a little tiny one for the kid, done a lot of home improvements, a lot of gardening. Gardening season's picking back up, and want to give a huge shout out to Will Strauss for his companion planting visualization that completely transformed how I'm planting this year. Probably my favorite thing I've learned how to do, although I don't know that I'll repeat it, is for Mother's Day, My wife said she really wanted a manicure, but in stay at home, none of those are open now. So I learned how to give a manicure for Mother's Day. I think I did an okay job, so long as we ignore the massive amount of nail polish that's currently on her cuticles. I think that turned out okay. I'm still active doing Viz stuff, even though it's not on Twitter, so it's a little harder to get in touch with me. But I just finished teaching a data Viz class. I've been helping to provide a number of patient perspectives for feedback on COVID visits. So I am a higher risk individual during this pandemic and helped to shape some visualizations by providing a perspective on what this might look like to an at-risk patient. I've been very active on the Data Viz Society's Slack channels around COVID and ethics. Been doing a ton of Tableau at work. We're actively marching on a lot of those things that Chris just mentioned. So very much transitioning from a whole bunch of Sherpas to a center of excellence that's moderated by a handful of shepherds. Participated in a few tugs, made a couple of visits on Tableau Public, and I'm desperately trying to chase down data on Ohio forestry, and it's a little bit difficult during this time. Wanted to begin all of this with all of that to say I still care about this community and I want to give back, but I won't be on Twitter. So if you want to get a hold of me, a really good way to do that is if you're in the Data Viz Society and on their Slack channel, you can reach out to me there. If you're not, I highly recommend joining that. So let's get into the narrative stuff. You can ask yourself if you would watch this movie. This is a common insight that I've seen on presentations. Acme Corporation improved the profitability of its sales center by 20%. I would not see that synopsis on Netflix and click watch. What about through call center process improvements and client prioritization, Acme Corporation increased the profitability of its sales center by 20%. I'm still probably not clicking watch. After investing his small life savings on a misguided product, homeless Chris Gardner tries to recover his career, family, and dignity by surpassing his more privileged peers in an unpaid competitive internship by establishing process improvements, client prioritization to increase profitability by 20%. That is something that I think I would be very interested in watching. And that, with the exception of me making up the number 20%, that is the plot of The Pursuit of Happiness. So the difference between these three things is genre. Description is that first category, exposition was the second one, and narrative was the third. To explain these things, description just describes a thing or an event, and we often use metaphors of senses. So seeing something, smelling something, touching, taste, hear, etc. An exposition explains a thing or an event. So you're really diving into a lot of those whys. A sort of cause and effect is really common here. And then in a narrative, you're portraying characters that are experiencing and reacting specific events over time. A key thing here is narrative, if we look at literature theory, there's a story and there's a narrative, and those are two different things. The story is this kind of world of events that happen. You think about all of Harry Potter and all the houses and all the things that possibly happen, and the narrative is the story that we're told, and it's how the story is told. So the narrative is that subset of the story that the author chooses to share with us. And in a narrative piece, we're able to witness how somebody experiences something. And if those characters are well written, it lets us experience something because we can empathize. And that enables us to come to understand something on multiple modes of belief. It's helpful to understand the idea of modes of belief. This is a concept from folkloristics, the study of folklore, and especially how we think about religious belief, but it applies across different kinds of belief. So we do a lot with data, and we present data, we present facts, we present figures, and we say this is the truth. The problem is all of us, no matter how data-driven we are, all of us use other ways to come to the truth as well. We don't just use data. Other ways we can understand the world and believe in something include emotion. They include faith, trust, logic, senses, and groups. This slide is not comprehensive. There are a number of other things. And no matter how data-driven you are, there are other ways we believe the truth. A good example is I'm highly skeptical that anyone watching this webinar has repeated the experiments that make us believe that light is both a wave and a particle. But we trust the scientific method. We trust our academic centers to peer review these things and provide a level of rigor so that we don't have to look at that data and analyze that data ourselves. There is a sort of built-in framework, and that includes modes of belief around groups, around logic, around trust. One can argue faith. All of those things together are how we're coming to believe that truth, even though we're very data-driven people. And you can expand this a lot. This slide's not supposed to provide clarity, but instead it's supposed to illustrate complexity, and that all of these things impact one another. And this is a lot of times why, when we're trying to convince someone, we miss the mark, no matter how compelling our data is, because we're only hitting on one mode of belief and we're not translating across other modes of belief. And so we're kind of missing the mark on how other people come to understand the truth. So what does this have to do with stories? We can go back to the stories, I'm using quotes now, that we often tell. And there's a thing I think that's very, very often missing. Robert McKee is a famous storytelling consultant for Hollywood, and he had this quote that I wanted to use as a sort of agenda for the rest of this presentation. Storytelling is the creative demonstration of truth. A story is a living proof of an idea, the conversion of idea to action. And so first we want to talk about living proof. One of the things that our stories tend to be missing are characters. When we watch a movie or we read a book, what tends to stick with us are characters. When Robert McKee points out this idea that we often describe movies as plot-driven or character-driven, but he kind of points out with a lot of really strong evidence in like a 400 and some page book, he points out that no, all good movies are character-driven. It's the way that the characters have desires and push toward things that really unfolds the plot. And if a movie is plot driven, it's not a good movie, because at that point we're just listing a sequence of events and our characters are just byproducts that don't have any control. So he posits that stories are really, really strongly driven by characters. And in the background here, you can see a number of characters that have meaningfully stood out to me over time. I can quote these characters. I can envision the scenes they're in, and I can even imagine what it's like in real life if they would respond to situations, because these characters exist so strongly that they can exist in my mind outside of just the original narrative I heard them in. This gets back to that idea of empathy. So watching The Pursuit of Happiness, I can watch Chris Gardner, and especially as a father, I can imagine how scary it would be if I couldn't provide for my family. And I can start to imagine the extremes that I hope I would go for to sacrifice everything, just like Chris Gardner did. And when I see Chris Gardner having these incredibly powerful emotional reactions to his life events, I can start to feel just a little bit what that would feel like. And so this entire story, which could just be a list of events like on Wikipedia, becomes something so much more powerful. It wraps the truth in human experience. One of the reasons this works so well is because it's hitting on multiple modes of belief outside of just the data. So I'm getting emotion, I'm getting senses, right? I can see these people, I can see how they're reacting, I can see tears, I can hear shakes in their voice. That really helps me understand what it means for someone to be in poverty. You can give me a statistic that tells me X number of people are in poverty every year. But if I don't see something like Chris Gardner, if I don't see someone that makes it real and hits that home, if I can't empathize that experience, I don't really understand what that statistic means. It's just a number. And it's hitting these multiple modes of belief that's so critical. And that's what narratives do with these characters. When you're thinking about a good character, we'll talk about a protagonist here. That primary character that your story is about, the character has to be willful. So no more of these stories of women that are just byproducts of men making decisions in movies. We're starting to see a lot of movies where women are the primary decision makers and the primary active agents in these narratives. We need willful characters. These characters have to have a desire. They have to be chasing after something. There has to be a goal. they have to have the ability to attain that desire. So unless you're trying to make a comedy and really play with suspension of disbelief, writing a story about a 99-year-old that's going to win a WWE championship match is probably not believable. There is a realm of comedy we can play with there, but that character otherwise is not going to have the ability to attain that desire. They have to be empathetic. And in this situation, that means like me as an audience member. I have to be able to see myself in this character. Now, an important caveat there is I have to get past the characterizations to see the character. So let's take relatively a polar opposite to myself as Deadpool. I'm not nearly as funny or good-looking pre-accident as Ryan Reynolds' character is. I don't think I have nearly as vicious of a personality, but I can imagine in a way that the sort of justice drive that Deadpool feels when somebody attacked his family or when somebody attacked him like that and how he reacts. And so I'm diving into the deeper layers of the struggles of that character. And that's where we can start to see things that are similar. And that's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. When I look at Chris Gardner, I can start to see a lot more about putting family first. I can start to see a lot about such a strong love for a family and a willingness to sacrifice, diving past the characterizations, that superficial level of who that character is. I can empathize and I can say this person is like me, which allows me to experience things. And that final thing is they have to take risks. If a character is not taking risks, the story is inherently boring. That doesn't mean the risks have to be huge. They can be very, very small, meaningful risks. We have, like Chris Gardner, many of us have taken unpaid internships in the hope that we would get a job at the end. That's a relatively small risk, but it's one that we can take and make a story from. Back to Robert McKee's quote. The other part of this is action. Characters do things. This goes back to them being willful. I have this background image of Tony Stark snapping his fingers. If you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. But I think this is one of the most powerful moments in character development in all of literature history. I'd probably have a lot of lit professors laugh at me for that. But we saw so much development of a back and forth of his character over the course of 20-some movies. And we really got the answer of which one of those back and forths his character was in this final movie. It was a very powerful moment. In these moments, we learn who characters really are. You can tell us who a character is, but when we see them do something like this, that's when it becomes real. So I can see that Gardner is a loving father because I watch him sacrifice so much. I watch him spend all of his life savings. I watch him work round the clock, but I also get to see him snap at his son and be angry. And I realize he's a complex person like me, and it would be hard to deal with that situation. So who he is revealed by what he does. And this is true of life, but especially true of literature. Then the following piece is truth. And this is where we're going to start getting back to data. Plot, as Robert McKee talks about it, is kind of an evidence. So I see Chris Gardner moving through this, and I learn about the specific stories of marginalized groups and the struggles that they go through that I, as a person with a little bit different privilege, might not experience. I really start to learn about all of these things and understand it as if someone came to me with data and said, look how hard it is for this person, look at all these numbers. This plot also serves as evidence. But then we can combine data. And when we do that, here's what's beautiful. All those modes of belief, if we have a narrative that gives context and it gives a relatable experience and we add in data, now in this specific example, I understand why this data about poverty is more meaningful, right? I'm able to talk to people on multiple modes of belief. I'm able to work through data and help them navigate that data logically and with trust through sensory information, through different group belongings, emotion. We can really attack it from multiple angles and help someone really understand what that data means, not just see a number, but really get the impact of it. So let's look at some data stories I'd watch on the big screen. This one's by Robert Janicek. This is called Music Memories. If you think very abstractly, you'll start to recognize this movie. It's one of the most watched movies of all time. But Robert Janizek collected data through text messages of his mother, or with his mother, about her favorite music over time, and also some of the historical events that happened. So we click on this first bubble here, and we find out when she bought her first album and what that album was. We click again. We get joy and sadness over here. So her emotion is being expressed a little bit. And now we're hearing about the Cleveland radio station, and it was her favorite radio station, right? She's a character with preferences and will. We start to see that a little bit further as we click. We get into some more meaningful historical moments like the death of John Lennon. We get to this point of where this viz really hit home for me, where she talks about how she would dance with the author of this viz to help him sleep, and the song that went with that. And then we start getting toward other incredibly powerful historic moments. This plot you might recognize, this is September 11, 2011. This plot you might recognize is pretty much Forrest Gump, right? We're gonna dive down through national history, but through the lens of looking at one character. And that's what Robbie has done here, and it's incredibly powerful. These text messages really bring his mother as a character to life. Let us witness a timeline of national events, give us a little bit about the emotional piece here. Let us understand data from a new level. Ludovic, in another Iron Viz feeder entry, took a little bit of a different route. These are hypothetical characters. But if you want to talk about risk and will in a character, this is where it really hits home. Ludovic's viz is about two immigrants that tried to escape a war situation. Refugees tried to get to the United States, one just 2 years beforehand. Now, these are hypothetical characters. He gave them names. He didn't dive too deep into a personality, but he gave them names. We start to understand their personality through just the basic risk they're taking of trying to leave their home and come to a new place, a new culture, new language, just to escape something else. And so all of that gives us just as much character revelation as if Ludovic had said, these are characters that care about their family. These are characters that are willing to take a risk. Just saying that they tried this gives us a little bit of an understanding, and giving them a name was incredibly powerful because we're able to see this effort they both put in toward escaping in a certain situation, and then seeing the results of just the difference in time that caused that. During my Iron Viz, my dashboard didn't really have a story in it, but I told a story. I gave it all meaningful, important context by introducing the dashboard and talking about a story with eating with my friend who was an immigrant, and how sharing his food was such an important moment for him to tell me who he was. In that sense, it was a story that unveiled the data, but the story wasn't necessarily in the data itself. But the story helped the users understand why this subject was meaningful and impactful. Now, I often hear when I talk about this level of storytelling, people say, but I or my boss or my user or my audience doesn't have time for that. And here's what I'll say. I don't think you need to tell a story in those situations. Good stories, for the most part, take time. There are like 2-second horror stories or 2-minute horror stories you can find online, but that takes a level of nuance and skill, and those are relatively undeveloped. To tell a good story, it takes time. And storytelling isn't always the right thing to do. But if we go back to those other two genres, there's descriptions and there's expositions, and those can be just as compelling as a story. You think about some of the deep dive New York Times or Washington Post data visualization stories where they're really digging into cause and effect and talking about different things that happened and caused other things. Those are typically expositions, but they're very, very powerful. Or most poetry sits in the realm of description and lets us see something from multiple angles. And Kim Adenizio is a poet that talks about capturing moments, not narratives, but a specific moment, and giving readers the ability to see that moment through good, strong description is evidence. And that's a powerful thing that poets can do. There are narrative poems, but the point is that there are different genres, and stories aren't always the best thing to do. But when you do tell a good story, one of the byproducts of that is a much stronger rhetoric, like you saw from Robert Janicek, like you saw from Ludovic. Hopefully that came across during my Iron Viz kind of unveiling and quick speech. Providing a narrative around that lets people experience that data in a way that helps them hit multiple modes of belief and really come to understand the levels deeper inside the data than a number ever can provide. That is it for my presentation. I'm going to minimize the screen. I'll pass it back to you, Lorna.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. It was so good to hear your story. And there's a question here from Jerome. What graphic elements are best for telling a story? And are you suggesting an anecdotal approach?
So the graphic elements, it really depends. I can't stress enough the impact of something that looks relatively human. That's why in this presentation, you saw a lot of stick figures. I just gave a presentation to the business unit where I work, and we used a lot of just vague, ambiguous looking stick figures because I just wanted this recollection of these are real people. That's not a chart, right? Stick figures not necessarily a chart, and please don't stack stick figures up on top of each other like some weird bar chart. But having small little moments like that, marketing does this all the time. You look at marketing and they have all sorts of images of like, here's our user persona. This is Teresa. She likes to buy X, Y, and Z from our stores. They do that all the time, and it's really about creating that empathy. For the anecdote piece, I would argue that that was largely a lot of Ludovic's methodology in terms of giving us these two hypothetical stories. I think anecdotes are a really good way to say, for example, here's this. So I would 100% support that in the right scenario.
Perfect, thank you. There is some other questions on the Q&A, so if you could just have a look at those for us and just give your answers on there. Thank you again very much, Josh. And I will take the screen. So next up, and finally, we have Steve Wexler. Steve is the founder of Data Revelations and co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards. Steve has worked with many organizations to help them understand and visualize their data. He is also a Zen Master Hall of Fame. And the title is Why the F Do We See So Many Bar Charts? But I will leave that over to Steve. Are you ready, Steve?
I am. Let me, you need to relinquish control, and I thank you for that. And thank you so much for having me today, and delighted to be with friends and colleagues. In any case, I'd like to thank you and others for taking the original title of this presentation. So often you're going to see new stuff. This is not stale, but when I've done this presentation before, I will submit it with the title you showed, and then it gets changed to this. And I look at this and think, that has to be the most boring presentation ever. Why do we see so many bar charts? I'm totally going to skip that, kind of like the Netflix synopsis when I watched that story that Joshua just put together, versus when I see this, oh, well, that looks kind of entertaining. Maybe I will stick around for that and see that. What has he got? Before I get into stuff, every presentation I give, you are encouraged to disagree with me. So, you don't get to talk and we don't get to see you, but you can type in chat and say when you don't think things are resonating or you have not seen this in your journey in data visualization. I do have a question for folks, and I'd like you to type into chat and be honest with me. How many of you think bar charts are boring? Okay, so if you think bar charts are boring, go ahead, type into chat and let me know what you think. Okay, I am getting, if you don't think they are, you can say no, or you can, pull an Andy Cotgreave and say, it depends. All right, I'm getting a lot of people saying yes, and this is my answer to it. It's not your bar chart, it's your data that's boring, and whenever I say that, I can't help, I hear Lewis Black in the back of my head. If you're not familiar with Lewis Black, check out his website, check out his comedy. Let's just say that the man has anger issues. In any case, let's discuss why we see so many bar charts, why it seems to be a default, etc. Any of you who have dealt with Superstore sales data have undoubtedly seen this. It is the subcategories and it's the sales for each subcategory. And if you let Tableau do what it wants to do this. It wants to create a bar chart, maybe you'll sort it, and you can answer all sorts of questions about your data. But those of you who are starting out, even some of you who've been very experienced for a while, you may end up playing around with the show me button and you decide, oh, look at this amazingly cool thing I stumbled on. It's got lots of colors. It's packed bubbles. It looks so cool. It's going to attract people's attention. But the minute you start trying to answer questions about your data with this thing on the right, as lovely as it may be, you're going to stumble. And I want to, if you haven't thought about this, and don't quite realize how your visual perception works, I'm going to give you a little quiz right now, and I'm going to ask you to see how well you can judge the length of bars from a common baseline versus the area of circles. So I, in fact, would like you to go to this URL, bit.ly/bars and circles, and you either need to use all small case for bars and circles or all proper case for bars and circles. And let's see how you do. If bar A over here is 100, how big is this bar? And if F is 100, how big is this circle, the area of the circle? And I'll give you a little time to try this out, and then we will see how you do. Don't take too long. Part of this is how quickly can you get an answer without having to think about it hard. It's supposed to be what data visualization is good at. Okay. Oh, you don't have to type into chat. You'd be giving it away to people. Let's see how people do. All right, so I'm gonna, and in my head, the Jeopardy theme song has just ended. So if you didn't get it in, don't worry about it. And let me show you the results as of yesterday. And this tells a pretty compelling argument for the difficulty with circles and how much easier it is to get bars. You know what, hold on. Let's add you folks to the discussion. Let me refresh this data. At 2,167 responses. Hopefully the internet gods will smile on us and this will refresh quickly. I'd like to see your responses that are here. All right, so the correct answer for the circle is 50. And look at all the guesses. There's a really wide distribution of these things. You've got only 42% of people guessing correctly and a bunch of people too low and a lot of responses too high. Now look at the bar. 79% got that right, almost double. And a handful of guesses that are too high and a handful of guesses that are too low. By the way, I thought, should I display the data like this so I could see how much easier it is to see that this bar is twice as big as this bar, or should I do it this way? My friend, colleague, and co-author Andy Cotgreave coined a wonderful term when you're trying to decide, well, what's the right chart to go with the data? He refers to it as existential angst. It was a slip of the tongue, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant. In any case, bottom line is we're really good at estimating the size of bars from a common baseline or the position of a dot from a common baseline. We're just not very good at handling with circles. So we just went through the result. So in fact, what is data visualization? This is a quote that comes from Andy Kirk, who has written a most excellent book called Data Visualization: the representation and presentation of data that exploits our visual perception abilities in order. Visualization is when you take advantage of what humans do well and you avoid what they do poorly. I want to go back to the circle for a second. And this freaked me out. Professor Matthew Kay at Tapestry Conference a couple of years ago, I'd always showed circles side by side, but he put a small circle inside a big circle. And he said, what percentage of the big circle is the small circle? Now, you're thinking about this to a way greater extent than your stakeholders probably are. I have done this example 150 times. I know what the answer is, but to me, it looks like it's taking up like 3/4 of the space. But the answer is it's taking up half. The small circle is half the area of the large circle. Now, a conclusion that people may have, and I don't want you to have it, is, oh, bars good, circles bad. No, bars are just great for getting accurate estimates. Circles, not so much, but I'll show you a perfectly fine example of using circles. I think this is the great use of circles. By the way, does anybody know what this is a map of? If you know what this is a map of, type it into chat. Please don't be a wise acre and say, oh, it's a map of the United States. It is definitely not COVID. A lot of people say population because they see the big blob for California, and then maybe 5 seconds later they go, oh, wait a minute, Washington and Oregon would not be that large, so that can't be right. IT companies is absolutely, electoral college and population is going to go the same. Shoreline, seafood consumption, sunlight. Wow, these are excellent. Well, one of my favorites was recreational use of marijuana as a guess, but then Colorado would be a lot bigger. The blob would be. Bottom line is, I have no idea what this is a chart of. I made it 7 years ago. I forgot to put a title on it, but I know whatever it's about, way more is happening on the West Coast than elsewhere. So this is very useful. I just can't make an accurate comparison and say how much bigger is the blob for California than the blob for Texas. Maybe I would have a bar chart augment this. All right, getting back to bars, but also getting into the whole foray of trying to get your organizations to embrace data visualization and why just the numbers isn't good enough. How many of you have stakeholders or colleagues who absolutely cling to their spreadsheets? Yeah, I don't need to see the charts. I don't need to see the graphs. I just want to see the numbers. Show me the spreadsheet. So let me show you an amalgam of every client I've had over the last 15 years. And to me, they're saying, you can have my spreadsheet when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. Well, how am I going to get these people to embrace data visualization and see, how remarkable it can be? So I introduced these people to the highlight table, AKA the gateway drug to data visualization. So let's do this together. Here is a spreadsheet. I've got 4 regions along the top. I've got 17 subcategories along the left side. And that's a total of 68 different values. I would like you to try to tell me which combination of region and subcategory is the most profitable and which is the least profitable. If you get the answer right faster than anybody else, you get 5 bonus points. What is the most profitable region and subcategory and least profitable? Okay, I'm waiting to see how people are doing. So you're looking at the data that's here, you're scanning through the numbers, what's the most profitable and what is the least profitable? South office machines, right? Whoever has got that, you get 5 bonus points. You can cash those in for toilet paper at the end of the presentation. Yes, office machines in the South is the highest and tables in the East is the lowest. That took about 20 seconds. You had to scan through all the numbers for you to get the answer. Had I made one change to this and done this, you would have gotten the answer instantly. Boom, dark orange. Boom, dark blue. Not only can I see that that's the worst, I can see tables in general is doing really poorly. I can see office machines is clearly popping out, but binders and binders accessories are doing really well. This usually gets people to pay attention, because you haven't taken away their beloved numbers. You've just made it easier for things in the numbers to pop. By the way, for you Excel virtuosi, you're probably already familiar with this. This is just conditional text. All right, maybe you've grabbed them. I want to take them to the next level. So I'll show them this. Let me see what we've got here. Along the top, I've got the day of the week, and along the left side, I've got the hour of the day. This is a highlight table. It's a chart showing the propensity of a certain politician to tweet. I'm not going to mention who the politician is. The fact that I'm using an orange color palette is completely a coincidence. And there are some things that pop out. I can see, ooh, there's, kind of big activity right around here. Thursday at noon is a popular tweet time. Well, suppose I ask my stakeholder, what day of the week does this person tweet the most? When do they tweet the least? What hour of the day is the most? What hour of the day is the least? I'll say, oh, well, that's a little difficult to get. And then I build a marginal histogram around this. And they go, oh, wow, now the things pop out. But they may say, well, wait a second. I don't believe you need the bar charts. Why don't you just show me the numbers again? So here are the number totals. And yes, I can scan through this sequentially and find the big numbers and the small numbers, but you're going to have the same problem again. And if I try the highlight table, I'm in a bunch of problems because I have much larger numbers here. I can't really see, the color distinction in here. But there's another reason besides the color. I just want to focus on these two values, 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. Okay? So let's just look at that. Hey, I can see that 11 a.m. is twice as big as 10 a.m. How can I see that? Well, I can read the numbers, and I know that 1376 is roughly twice as big as 672. A great way to test your visualizations and see how clear they are is remove the numbers. Are you going to tell me you can tell me accurately that the orange on the bottom is twice as orange as the orange on the top? If you can do that, you have a skill that nobody else on the planet has. Now, let's go back and look at the marginal histogram with the bar chart around it. If I remove the numbers, I can clearly see that the 11 a.m. bar is about twice as big as the 10 a.m. bar. So getting back to using color, we can see that one shade is darker than another. That is obvious. But to say that it is 2 or 3 times as dark is not visible. It is not readable. Does anyone know who said that? I will give you 50 bonus points if you know who made that quote. And no, it's not. It is not I, but thank you. It comes from Charles Menard in 1861 when he was criticizing chloropleth mat. And not that it was bad. Oh, if you're wondering who that is, it's that guy. It's the person who made the famous Napoleon campaign on Russia. And if you have not seen this thing before, trust me, in your data visualization voyage, you will. In any case, something we always come back to, Jeff Schaefer and I and Andy Cockreeve in our dashboard workshops, is always think of who is your audience, what's the message, and this has become a distillation of everything I tried to do. Provide the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort. Get people to see what they need to see with a minimal amount of effort, at least in business communications. In an infographic or something where you're trying to get emotion, maybe there's some other reasons. So let's get back to that first question. Then why the F do we see so many bar charts? I saw this movie towards the end of last year, Eddie Murphy movie on Netflix, Dolomite Is My Name. And let me set up a pivotal scene. So Eddie Murphy plays Rudy Ray Moore, who is a failed R&B singer, and he ends up becoming a comedian, does these raunchy record albums. They start selling well. He is touring the country, and he's getting tired of touring. He wants to make a movie. So he decides to finance his own movie using advance royalties. He makes the movie and no studio will distribute it. And his record company says, we'll give you advance royalties, but if this doesn't work out, you are in debt to us for the rest of your life. Makes the movie, no studio will distribute it. Moore rents a movie theater for a single late night show. The show sells out, but there's still no distributor. All right, so we cut to the next scene, and we see a sleazy movie producer and studio head, played by Bob Odenkirk of Better Call Saul. And he picks up a copy of Variety. And he's looking through a table of numbers, and he sees something that absolutely astounds him. He ponders, looks up, and exclaims, "What the F-ity F?" Let's see how you would do. This is similar to what was shown there. Can you see something amazing in this? You'd have to work hard. Now, let me change this visualization. Can you see it now? How about now? And if you still can't see it, this is about, I'll channel my inner Bugs Bunny at the moment. But that bar chart makes it so easy to see there's an outlier. And if maybe you had some intelligent conditions in your dashboard that says anything that's a clear outlier, anything greater than 75% color coded. So the answer to why the F do we see so many bar charts is because it gets us to what the F-ity F so much faster. If you want to continue the discussion, this is my website, datarevelations.com. This is where you can reach me. Josh, we miss you on Twitter, but glad you are super productive. And you can find out about about Big Book of dashboards and workshops and things like that. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand things back to Lorna.
Great. Thanks, Steve. That was such a good presentation. I always love watching you present. A question was, what did you use for your spotlighting? But I think it's the Logitech Spotlight, right?
Yes. So everyone thinks Andy came up with this first. Okay, I found it first, and I gave one to Andy, and I gave one to Jeff. Well, I know I gave one to Jeff. I think I gave one to Andy. So it's a Spotlight presenter. The thing's great. You can also, I'm not sharing my screen, but in addition to just spotlighting, it can also zoom in on stuff. And yeah, no one ever cares about the content. They just want to know where I got the gizmo.
Everyone cares. They were asking about how you did the combination charts, but we have someone that's posted a link for your for the chart itself, so the marginal histograms. So yeah.
Which, by the way, that is not my creation. I think I first saw Shine do that, and Ben Jones. They were doing it around a scatter plot, and I realized, oh, it would work great around a highlight table as well. And they don't come automatically, but they're not terribly difficult to make.
Cool. And then one question just popped up. What is your favorite type of bar chart?
My favorite type of bar chart. So at 3 a.m. I will come up with the really clever, witty thing, and I'll get everybody's phone number and wake them up. I remember years ago at a Tableau user group, and someone saying, well, what's your favorite type? What's your favorite chart? And it's whichever one shines the best, brightest light on the data. So I would say whichever thing it is at the time. So I don't think I have a favorite bar chart, though I do like divergent bar charts, and I can let you look that up at your leisure.
So is that an Andy Cockgreave answer of it depends?
And it really does. It really does depend. It's whichever thing best serves the data and the audience at that given moment.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time, Steve. It was great to hear you talk. I'm just going to share my screen again. So the next event we're hosting is on Thursday, the 28th of May. It's going to be 3 p.m. BST, 7 a.m. PST, and 7:30 p.m. IST. So hopefully you can make it to the next event. The splash page isn't ready yet, but once it is, you'll get a link from the email that you have signed up with. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to all of the speakers. It's been really great to listen to all of your stories. Please stay safe, stay well, and hopefully we'll get to speak or see you soon, even if it is virtually. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Thank you, Lorna. Hey, bye, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.